I love Ed Markey's response when Katie Tur says, will you negotiate for forcing work requirements on those receiving SNAP food stamps, etc.? And he says, no, I'll vote against that. And why would I vote against that? And then Katie says, the poll says that 49% of Democrats, 66% of independents, and 80% of Republicans want a work requirements for food stamps. And he says, well, did you ask them about the polls about tax cuts for the wealthy? She says, oh, they hate that too. Here's the thing. You have to be careful of how you ask the question. People would have a tendency to believe that work requirements are there to reduce the usage of the SNAP benefits, which would probably reduce the usage of SNAP benefits because you are forcing people who are on food stamps to attempt to find a job. Here's the deal. Most people want to have conditions where they have a job. Now, forcing all the paperwork and the bureaucracy to create the system that's going to test people if they're looking for a job and all of that bureaucracy costs money. You'll probably spend more money on that bureaucracy than those who would try to cheat the system. It's the same reason why when we gave PPP loans that we didn't ask a whole lot of questions of these businesses. But for businesses, we just throw the money at them and they can do as they please. But for the poor person who are going through the indignities of being poor in this country, we want them to suffer. I want you to listen to how Ed Markey spoke about this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
One of the people who is urging President Biden to invoke the 14th Amendment, that is the Democratic senator from Massachusetts, Ed Markey. Senator, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you about that in a moment, but I do want to ask you about work requirements. If a deal is made on adding work requirements to any one of the areas that Benji Sarlin just laid out, would you say yes to that? Would you vote yes?
I would vote no. How outrageous would it be that the trillions of dollars of tax breaks that Donald Trump and these very Republicans extracted for billionaires in America and millionaires in America are untouched. And the only thing we deal with are poor people and work requirements for them in order to receive relatively small benefits from the federal government. That is absolutely unconscionable. So it just shows you how much the right-wing Republican caucus of the Republican Party is now controlling this discussion. And from my perspective, it's just cruel, it's heartless. By the way, 50% of all children in the United States, 50% will be on food stamps, will be on SNAP at some point in their life. So can you just imagine that's what they're putting on the table as a demand in terms of concessions from the Democratic Party? Unacceptable to me.
So I know you call it unconscionable. You say it's cruel. I just want to put up what the polling suggests about it. And that's Americans broadly think that, well, mostly Republicans, but independents and even 49% of Democrats say they support requiring work requirements for Medicaid or SNAP benefits. Why do you think there is such broad support for this?
Well, I would ask when you put up that poll that you also put up the identical poll on tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires and trillions of dollars that have been given to them over the last 5 years.
The majority of Americans also agree that millionaires and billionaires should be paid or should be taxed more as well. That's true.
So put it on the table. Let's have a reasonable negotiation. Let's have all of the causes of the increase in the public debt be discussed. Instead, it's a one-way street. And to me, it's just something which is unacceptable, which is why I believe at the end of the day, as a last resort, if they're not reasonable, that the president should invoke the 14th Amendment, which says that the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. So authorized by law means all the bills that have ever passed in our country's history that authorize this spending have to be honored. And the president can invoke that and just say to them, come back later if you're ever interested in having a real negotiation.
I want to ask you about that, but one more on work requirements. If taxes for the very wealthy were also on the table, would you agree to voting for work requirements if there was also a requirement to raise taxes on the very wealthy among us?
Taxes for the very wealthy are never going to be on the table. We know that, any more than cuts in defense spending are ever going to be on the table. The Republicans don't want to look at the two main causes for the increases in our public debt. And then they want to turn to the poorest in our society and punish them for the conditions that they have very little control over. So it's just so imbalanced in terms of what the negotiation is right now, as we're hearing it, that the 14th Amendment should sit there as the last resort, but a necessary resort if the Republicans are not reasonable. And I don't believe that the right-wing Republicans in the House of Representatives will allow that to happen.
Janet Yellen says invoking the 14th Amendment would trigger a constitutional crisis. Why do you think she's wrong?
I don't think it's a constitutional crisis. I just repeated what the words are. They're very clear on their face. The Supreme Court says that they are textualists, the six-seat majority, which now controls the Supreme Court. And if they are textualists, if they read the plain words of the 14th Amendment, that the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law should be paid. It's very clear. There's no way around it. And if they do that, it will not be a constitutional crisis. It will be the Constitution upheld and ultimately going back to regular order with the budget and appropriations process for the next Congress being the way in which we deal with all of these questions, which the Republicans are trying to jam inappropriately into this negotiation.
So there are 11 senators who agree with you, 11 including you. There's Warren, Sanders, Markey, Tina Smith, Blumenthal, Fetterman, Hirono, Reid, Welch, Whitehouse, and you, Ed Markey. You have a letter. Have you spoken directly to either President Biden about this or anyone at the White House?
Well, we've sent the letter to him, and obviously, as a result, we are communicating with the White House, and those are the first 11 signatures. That's after 24 hours. I think as people come to understand the 14th Amendment and the requirement to pay our bills, that we're going to have not only a lot of additional support amongst Democrats in the Senate, but all across the country, because that's the way of avoiding draconian cuts or unconscionable burdens placed upon the poorest in our society.
Barring the 14th Amendment, do you think Democrats should dig in, call the Republicans bluff?
Look at the Republicans are bullies. You know, they bullied their way into stealing 2 Supreme Court seats. They want to bully their way into using our public debt as a way of extracting unjustified concessions from this congressional process. And we have to stand up to the bullies, or else they'll keep coming back over and over and over again. And again, that's why the 14th Amendment is one of the strategies that we have to seriously consider and, if necessary, to ultimately use.
So again, the 14th Amendment is what we need to do. Get rid of the bullies. Stop taking advantage of the poor. Most of the people in the poor want to work. To go ahead and say, we have to have you document all these work requirements to go ahead and qualify for what all of us, the commons, want to provide to you, is simply hogwash. We don't do that when we're given tax cuts. We don't do that when we're given subsidies to businesses. And that's why the business is the biggest form of welfare in this country. It's businesses who rip us off. Businesses who take our monies for the military, businesses who create the military industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, and all these things. What do? They overbill, they rip us off, and we're going to go off the measly food stamps the few dollars we're given in food stamps for people and say, to get these measly dollars, we're going to create yet another bureaucracy, likely run by a private company, to determine if we're going to give you whatever amount of few dollars we give you so that you don't die from hunger. Folks, ask the questions correctly, people, so that when you do a poll, the humanity of people can come out other than what you have instilled in their minds to make the wrong choices. Ed Markey, you're correct. President Biden, the 14th Amendment is the way to go. Let them take it to court. Let them be the ones who say, we don't want to use the 14th Amendment to prevent the catastrophe, so let's cause the catastrophe by having a right-wing court vote with us. I doubt they'll do it. The businesses will get to them before. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.